At some point in the 90s, Americans developed an adverse reaction to station wagons, where they decided that SUVs were going to propel Americans into the future and the 21st century. That sedans, station wagons, hatchbacks is over. It's over. We just want crossovers and SUVs. And for 30 years, it has been dull, boring, and just sad, really. It's just a dreadful time to be a car enthusiast, or really for someone who doesn't want to buy a crossover, because even today now, sedans are becoming an endangered species. But if you're someone who is looking for something a bit more unique on the used market, you have a couple of options. An Audi A4 Allroad, for example, or maybe even a Volkswagen Golf Alltrack. 6 years ago, my dad decided that he needed a new vehicle. He didn't want to live the crossover lifestyle anymore, but he still needed a car that was going to be practical. And a hatchback wasn't going to cut it, neither was a sedan, so he landed on the Alltrack. And in today's video, we're going to find out what the Alltrack has provided my dad over the last 6 years or so, and to see if this is a worthy means of transportation even now in the 2020s. Getting into pricing on the used market for one of these, you're looking at right around $20,000 for the average price according to Car Gurus, which, to put that into perspective, this Alltrack is an S, so a base trim back in 2020, came in just above $27,000. But back in 2020, Volkswagen was making room for the new Taos, and they were practically giving these away. I think my dad paid $24,500 for this Alltrack. Amazing. Think about that. In 2020, a brand new station wagon at $24,500, and interest rates were lower at that time. I don't think my dad's going to find a better deal even now in 2025. So you might be holding on to this a little bit longer. Then getting into the reliability aspect for the Golf Alltrack here, over the last 5.5, close to 6 years of ownership and 70,000 miles on the odometer, nothing has popped up. It's all scheduled maintenance. The only thing that was not scheduled was a faulty infotainment system. But that is not a common issue here for the Alltrack. Common issues would be a water pump, of course, with this being a car built on the MQB platform. And then also on the higher end with the SE trim and above, there is some leaking issues with that power moonroof. But this is an S, so slick top, that's not going to be a problem. So reliability-wise, or even just maintenance-wise, it has not been difficult to maintain this car. It has not been costly either. Now, as we transition to the exterior appearance for the Volkswagen Golf Alltrack, let's just take some time out of this day to appreciate what Volkswagen did here. Because in 2019, they were one of very few manufacturers that had the intestinal fortitude to offer a station wagon in the US. In its price range, you only had the Subaru Outback, and some people might argue the Outback is not a station wagon with the 8.7 inches of ground clearance, but take a look at that body style. It is a station wagon. With the Alltrack, you did get a little bit of a different design compared to the Sport Wagon, where you had the cladding for the wheel arches, side profile, and a lifted ground clearance of around 7 inches. So it was supposed to be designed to be off-road worthy or able to take on snow-covered roadways, and that was Volkswagen's way of trying to sell this to the American market. Unfortunately, it failed, and the Golf Alltrack was only offered for 3 years here in the US. Up front, you did receive LED daytime running lights if you chose the S, but for the SE and above, you got full LED headlights for better visibility at night or in adverse weather conditions. Also made the Alltrack look a bit more upscale. Whereas with the S, you got halogen headlamps and halogen fog lamps. So not as nice to look at. My dad has kind of complained about that. He wished he had LED lights for nighttime driving. Now, you did have this nice honeycomb mesh grille, very small here compared to what we now have with vehicles that are much larger with that grille design. And then for the lower portion of the front bumper, you have some contrasting accents here, which kind of remind what you have with Audi's lineup, where they do give you some silver accents for the S trims, and then there's more honeycomb mesh grille here. So a nice two-tone look for the Alltrack up front. Then as you make your way over to the side profile, with the S, you had 17-inch alloys. There were better wheel designs, though, for the SE and above, although when it came to tire size, I think the ride quality and interior insulation was best for the S. For me, though, I love the silver painted side mirror caps. I love it. It reminds me of Audi with the S4 or S3. It just gives you a cool design here for this car. Best of all, you will have turn signal indicators, and also for 2019, and this was standard for the S and above, you received blind spot detection, rear cross traffic alert, and also front collision warning. So you got a lot more safety out of this car for its final model year run, and I think that provided a lot more value here, especially for a car coming in under $30,000. And then making your way around to the back for the final third of the Alltrack. Not only do you get a GTI or Golf hatchback appearance, but best of all, for the 2019 model, LED tail lamps did come standard. So you had a car that looked a bit more modernized for the rear fascia, unlike up front. So there were incentives to choose the SE and above. But still though, to have LED tail lamps here in 2019, Subaru didn't offer that. So this car looked a bit more modern and I think sleeker as well. Just like we saw up front and for the side profile, a lot of the contrasting accents do make their way to the final third as well, with the cladding, but then also the brushed aluminum look here for the lower portion of the rear bumper. But also one thing I liked as well, the dual exhaust outlets. Even though this wasn't a sports station wagon, it gave you that cooler look that some station wagons weren't offering in 2019. Hopping inside our Volkswagen Golf Alltrack, with this being the S, I personally think this is the pick out of the three trims, most because you don't get that power moonroof, which there have been a lot of complaints about that leaking, so you might want to just go with the slick top here. But I personally think that Volkswagen went above and beyond the Call of Duty for a base model, because what you are going to receive is heated leatherette seats for both the driver and passenger. Sure, there's no power or adjustability here, but for a car coming in at $30,000, was that even expected at the time? Not really. A lot of vehicles had this same setup, but you received cloth upholstery instead, which, some people do like, but I think it would have made this car feel very, very cheap. Now, with these seats, they're comfortable. They're not aggressively bolstered. They're not that supportive. But on a weekday commute, you should find yourself rather comfortable here. For myself, though, I've just never really enjoyed driving this on longer trips at all. Just the way the seats are shaped, there's some discomfort when it comes to my legs, but that just might be my personal body frame and height here, so take that with a grain of salt. In front of you will be your information display in between your analog gauges, which you can control by using the buttons on your leather-wrapped steering wheel, which again feels pretty nice here for a car under $30,000. Now this information display is set up much like we see with a lot of vehicles built on the MQB platform, a lot of those cars from the Mark 7 generation. So you're still going to have more of a tactile and analog experience here with this car. Then as you make your way over to the infotainment system, the base trim got a 6.5-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. The SE and above did get an 8-inch touchscreen, and you could get a better audio system. Now with the S though, I think this is more than adequate, more than sufficient, and to me, I think this technology is aging very well compared to what we now have from Volkswagen, which I think Volkswagen has completely lost their minds with their newer softwares, their newer MIBs or interfaces. So on both sides of the screen will be quick access icons for your radio, media, car, phone, app, and setup, and then 2 dials for your volume and tuning. So much like we see with the Mark 7 GTI. And this setup really is the happy medium here. If you just want that larger screen, by all means. But a 6.5-inch touchscreen in 2025, I think still looks pretty good here. Now you will have a rear backup camera, but no surprises here, no trajectory. We don't have that with the GTI either of this day and age. Beneath that, you are going to find more buttons and dials for your climate control settings, your AC, front rear defrosters, fan speed, fan direction, and also your 3-level heated seats. Beneath that will be the cubby for your smartphone or other smaller items, and there will be that USB input, which I have to say is just placed so inconveniently. Next to your gear shifter will be one single button, at least for the S, and that is your drive mode selector. With the Alltrack being somewhat off-road capable, you will have Eco, Normal, Sport, Custom, and Off-Road, and then pair that up with the 4Motion all-wheel drive system, you should be able to take on some snow-covered roadways or some dirt roads. Interestingly enough, though, there is no button for your auto start-stop, and unfortunately with the GTI, I have to constantly turn that off when I get behind the wheel of my car. So really great to see that you didn't have that here with the Alltrack. But pretty standard stuff here for this car, but I do think it gets a bit better when you start taking a look at the interior space and that cargo area. Then for passengers in the second row, you had right around 35 inches of legroom, which isn't the best, but it's on par with a lot of smaller subcompact crossovers. So even comparing this to a Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, I mean, this is a bit more spacious. On top of that, these second row seats do sit a bit lower to the ground to maximize that headroom, so tall passengers will not be hitting their head on the headliner. It is very family friendly. I think it's a bit more family friendly than a Volkswagen GTI here. And you got to remember too, it is based off of a hatchback and a smaller platform. So this is not going to be like a Passat wagon that they had over in Europe, and I think this is a bit smaller than an A4 all-road. Now also when it comes to that legroom, it's a bit shorter than say a Subaru Outback of its day, but For a car that does have the Volkswagen emblem, I think you're receiving a lot here for a car at its price point, even now at around $20,000 on the used end for a 2019 model. Now, I do think you can try squeezing in a third person in the center, and mostly because the center hump, yes, it is aggressive, but not wide. So I think people will be fighting for some elbow room, but it's not going to be too cramped or claustrophobic. More importantly, though, you do have two center-mounted air vents, which is kind of rare to see for a car under $30,000, even back in 2019 and around 2020. So better airflow for passengers in the second row. No USB-C or USB outlet. Heck, there's not even a 12-volt outlet, which is one of the reasons why I kind of don't like the cars this day from the MQB platform, because you don't have the smartphone connectivity for the second row. However, you do receive a center armrest with two cup holders. And then we get to the major selling point here. And this is why I will never understand Americans' distaste for station wagons in this country. So behind the second row seats, you have right around 30.5 cubic feet of room. Remember, this is a car that came in under $30,000. Try finding a subcompact crossover today under 30 grand that gives you this much space. I think the Nissan Kicks is the only vehicle that does that right now. Americans for years have complained we want more interior space. We want a more family-friendly vehicle. And Volkswagen gave us that. They gave us a vehicle that was practical. They gave us a station wagon that, one, was versatile thanks to its ground clearance, but then two, had enough interior space where you could have two small kids in the second row and have tons of room for luggage if you're going on a road trip with the family. This was a great solution. This was the solution to crossovers, and unfortunately, Americans didn't buy it. On both sides of the rear cargo area, you will have some quick release latches to lower those second row seats. And when they are lowered, you're looking at right around 66.5 cubic feet of room. This is compact crossover territory. So this is one of the reasons why the Alltrack, if you're looking at buying one, this is the way to go. If you're looking at buying a car that gives you the practicality you're looking for, but you don't want to buy a crossover, the Alltrack is one of those cars that just fits. It fits that lifestyle, it fits those demands. Now, also on top of this, you will have a rear cargo cover, which will keep all your valuable items out of sight. But then also beneath the floor mat, you will find a spare tire. So if you encounter a flat on those road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. And lastly, with the Volkswagen Golf Alltrack, you received a 1.8-liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine, producing 168 horsepower and 199 pound-feet of torque, and it could be paired with either a 6-speed manual or 6-speed DSG, which is why so many enthusiasts love this station wagon. Better yet, you received Volkswagen's 4Motion all-wheel drive system, and that came standard. So this was a great year-round daily driver, and then you pair that up with the 7 inches of ground clearance, you could take on those snow-covered roadways. When it pertained to fuel economy, you were looking at right around 21 miles per gallon in the city and around 30 miles per gallon on the highway. Not the best in this class, but it's a turbo 4, so it's not going to be the most economical, but it was good enough to make this a great daily commuter. Further adding on to the incentives for the Alltrack is that this suspension is tuned very softly, and then with the 17-inch alloy wheels, the ride quality really is phenomenal for a car that came in under $30,000. Also, you got to take in consideration that it was built on the MQB platform, so you are going to receive a lot of refinement here out of this station wagon, especially compared to the Subaru Outback of its day, although the Outback was a bit more off-road worthy than the Alltrack. Now, if you were to drive a Volkswagen Golf or GTI, your seating position is a bit lower to the ground. You feel more connected to the chassis, whereas with the Alltrack, because it does sit a bit higher up off the ground, you feel as though you're driving a crossover. And to some degree, you feel a disconnect between you and the vehicle. But in some ways, that's kind of a good thing here, because at times I forget that I'm driving a station wagon. I feel as though I'm driving a crossover. So to appease Americans, this was kind of a great way to get them into something a little different. Performance-wise, though, out of this 1.8-liter turbo, it is not the quickest car out there. You're looking at a 0 to 60 time of around 7.5 seconds with the 6-speed DSG, whereas with the manual, you could get it close to 6.5 seconds, which is kind of impressive. Not as noteworthy as that with this 6-speed DSG, it was one of the few cars in its class that didn't have a CVT. So your gear shifts were smooth, they were crisp. I will say that there is some turbo lag out of this 1.8, but I'm not expecting anything different here out of this car. Steering input wise, there's some confidence here. You know, it's nowhere close to a Volkswagen GTI, but it's enough to get you somewhat excited when you are on some winding back roads. Especially right now during this time of year with the fall foliage, you could take this out on some winding back roads, maybe up to the mountains, and really enjoy your time on a weekend drive. More importantly for a station wagon like this, the interior insulation is actually not that bad. I mean, yes, you are hearing some of the road noise, you're hearing some of the tire noise. Again, this is still an economical car. This is still a car that's not going to be like an Audi A4 all-road, but I would like to look at it as an A4 all-road for the masses. Unfortunately, the masses here in the US didn't find it appealing because they want their crossovers. And then looking into the future and comparing this to its successor, the Volkswagen Taos, I like the Alltrack more. I think the fit and finish is better. I like the technology more, the physical buttons and dials. And at the time, back in 2019, 2020, this was in some way your entry point into a luxury car, right? No cloth seats. We talked about this before. With the yes, you got heated leatherette seats. And that just meant a lot on the lower end for buyers looking for an affordable car. In some ways, this was a sophisticated station wagon for a country that doesn't appreciate what these cars offer. All in all, 6 years later, I don't think my dad could have found any better, especially at his price point. When we got this at around $24,000, $25,000, there wasn't much out there. He didn't want to go back to a crossover. And looking at the resale value for these, what a deal. What a deal back in 2020. And that was during lower interest rates. So when I look at what this car has provided the family, what it's been like to drive on a daily basis, this is one really good station wagon that if you're ever lucky enough to find one that is clean, that has lower mileage, or just hasn't been abused, I would say go for it. Find one of these, buy one of these, enjoy the car. It's a great daily, it has decent fuel economy, it's quiet, it's comfortable. Sure, it's not fast, it's not quick, but not a lot of crossovers at around $25,000 are quick either. So if you're someone who doesn't find a subcompact crossover appealing, with the Alltrack, you have the interior space, you have the practicality, you have that cargo space, it has everything going for it. It just comes down to, are you one of those buyers that want something a bit more performance oriented? And if that's the case, I would say look at an A4 all-road, because you really can't go wrong with these cars, especially for what they're offering and at their price points. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick review for the Volkswagen Golf Alltrack. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, let me know if you want to see more older cars make its way onto the channel. Not just the new stuff, but also the old stuff that's kind of getting overlooked. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I will see you guys next time.